I know I've begun to really appreciate the Psalms, and I wonder, there's a place for, when we're supposed to bring psalms, hymns and spiritual songs, for the Psalms to be reintroduced. I suppose you probably already use them in a variety of ways. We use them to meditate on in groups during the week, which we found to be highly missional as well. Interestingly, people really wanting to meditate on those truths. Maybe you could put some of those psalms to music and put some art with them for us, Chris, in your spare time over this year.
The Psalms are a vitally important part of Scripture for me. If I'm having to choose the bits that I go to most, the Psalms will be one of that. In terms of my shelf of commentaries, I've probably got more commentaries on the Psalms than I have on any other parts of Scripture. And that's partly because, as a matter of daily practice, I will want to read from the Psalms as a part of my personal devotions. And they provide so much variety, from praise, from devotion, to lament, to really questioning God about why things are the way they are. There's such a range of human emotion there, and they provide us with words that are scriptural words where we can express those range of emotions and bring them to God.
I suppose it's where you talked earlier about the love of the Psalms. It's where the psalmist or psalmists have a lot to teach us, because they do bring the world with them into the presence of God. I wonder for yourself personally, if there have been times or maybe even particular psalms that have meant a lot to you in your personal worship life and deepening of your relationship with God.
Yes, I think, firstly, you said about people bring themselves, and the psalmists bring themselves into the mix. I always remember reading Thomas Merton, who spoke about his becoming a monk, and how people thought that monks went into monasteries to get away from the world. And Merton simply comments, they take the world with them in their hearts. That we cannot be other than who we are. So even when we try and withdraw, we're bringing our social attitudes, our politics, our prejudices, our anxieties, all these things we're bringing with us, and they're a part of what we are when we stand before God. So however much we try and withdraw, we're not actually withdrawing, and we need to own up to it and face it. And what the Psalms do, in a sense, is to draw some of those themes out. There are parts of the Psalms that we probably wouldn't want to use as a prayer because they are unchristian. Historically, they're pre-Christian. They were written hundreds of years before the time of Christ. But there are aspects of the emotion and the intent and the prayer that's a part of some of the Psalms that we would say is contrary to what Christ has shown us and taught us, about what it says about our enemies. But as we read them, it draws out or brings to the surface some of those things that we may try and repress and ignore, which we need to face up to in order to offer them to God and ask God to deal with them.
Are there other echoes there for yourself? You talked earlier in the interview about times when you need to be going deeper because life is throwing things at you that are hard to cope with. Have you examples? I imagine you have in your own life.
In terms of particular Psalms, I can remember Psalm 139, which is about God's intimate knowledge of us. There's nowhere I can go where God won't be. There's nothing I can experience that God won't have been there first, because he made me in my mother's womb, and so on. I can remember trying to, not memorize, trying to bring as much to mind as I could of that psalm while flat on my back in an MRI scanner, with the horrible noises that you have when you have that scan. And it was this sense of somebody scrutinizing my body. And what I did was I brought Psalm 139 to that. And it's a psalm that I return to. It's a psalm that I will normally use in the funeral service. But at other times as well, it has such power because it's both about God's intimate knowledge of me and yet God's mercy and understanding.